in Apocalypse Cult by accident. The situation is not really necessary to know. He kind of called something when he was 18, and then it happened in 2022. And now he's getting a lot of money that he feels he doesn't deserve, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And he has all these people trying to follow his apocalypse cult, and he doesn't know what to do about that either. And he's being chased by a first-person lead, and at this point in the book, you don't know who it is. And to be frank, I don't quite know who it is either. All right, here we go. Richard had always thought of the land as his own. It was a couple of miles outside Freeburg, and the entrance wasn't marked. And even after visiting dozens of times, he sometimes found himself wondering if he'd missed it until he suddenly came upon it. The trees were tight along the long dirt road, which turned and sloped until a sudden clearing. There, a small blue lake. On one side of the water was a two-story wood house on stilts, on the other a dense woodland. When Richard was a child, he had walked the property with his parents, back when they all did things. It was the only walk they'd ever take. And as Richard grew, he started to go to the property himself after his parents stopped doing anything together at all. His porn magazines were wrapped in plastic and buried under a tree, their grave marked by a particular pattern of rocks. He would pay men outside the liquor store to buy the magazines for him, and then he would race over to the property on his bike. Later, he brought beer too, and liquor, but somehow his woods remained the woods of innocence. Arcadia, despite the empty bottles and the spent shame. It was as if teenage luridness was required to access what he really loved about the land. Afterward, the sound of crickets, dirt beneath his legs, stars above the trees. The owner of the home died at some point and had his ashes thrown in the lake, and Richard came to know the land better, so well that he even walked it from his own bed at night. He could cross the lake by floating on the water, fish scattering beneath his steps. The property had been sold twice since the first owner died. The first person who bought it never came, and in those years, Richard became bolder and often broke into the house on quiet nights. Sometimes he'd even recline on the bed, eat old popsicles out of the freezer, fake chocolate, too sweet. The next owner, an elderly man, had made improvements, septic tank and a Wi-Fi router, and Richard felt some gratitude toward him when he saw him in town, but he died, and the land had gone up for sale, then been foreclosed upon. When Richard saw the amount in his GoFundMe, this is the amount from the illegal Apocalypse Cult. When Richard saw the amount in his GoFundMe, he pounced. A few weeks later, he walked the land again. He wasn't an intruder skulking in high hills. He was experiencing a homecoming, parents' ghost alongside. When he was a child, Richard had loved the Redwall books. He read them over and over, but only the first parts of each story, when the gentle mice of Redwall Abbey lived peacefully together with cellar-keeper hedgehogs and industrious moles, and the villain's far-off specks on the narrative horizon. Clooney the Scourge, Gabool the Wild, Slagar the Cruel. On that first night, before he went to bed, Richard stood out on the balcony and looked at the stars. If he could have stopped everything right there, he would have been happy. He decided to name the compound Sanitaria. I've been to Sanitaria too. I walk the ground. It's nothing special. It's just a patchwork of mottled grass. I climb hills to the forests covered in pine cones. I haven't bothered with the clearing or the long cheap houses with all the horrors that came later. Too much police tape. Too many other gawkers. Anyway, I'm not interested in what happened. I want to know why. So I stay in the woods for the most part, searching for a pattern of stones. I finally came upon them, deep in the forest beneath a random tree. I dug many-legged insects on dirty plastic beneath Richard's magazines. I put them in my backpack and took them home. I look at them sometimes, thinking of him. The night I found the magazines, I finally was sneaking onto the balcony outside the lake house. If I'd been caught by a policeman, I would have told them the truth, but no one was there. Just the compounding. I don't know how long I stayed. I even closed my eyes. What's the point of seeing? The stars are the same as the stars anywhere else. I tried to think about all the people who had gathered there believing in him, but I couldn't get it. Is there some deficiency in me that I've never believed in anything? Although, I never told Richard this, but I like those early scenes in Redwall best too. Finally, I rose. I decided to do what he'd imagined doing at night before he ever owned Sanitaria. I walked toward the lake. Stones were slick and green, and the faint smell of rot came from the shore. The surface was alive. I took off my shoes. I rolled up my pants. I walked into my knees. The water was freezing, darker than dark. I closed my eyes again. I thought about her. Thank you.
That's great. Next up, Adam Dawson's forthcoming memoir is called Room to Swing an Axe. He is currently working on a novella about zombies and mudbogging called Deep in the Jeeps of Georgia. He teaches YA fiction and multimedia. Please welcome Adam.